Tottenham today confirmed the signing of Bryan Gil from Sevilla with Eric Lamela and €25 million going in the opposite direction. And today I'm joined by Ryan Benson to get an in-depth analysis of our new player, telling us everything we need to know about him and why we should be excited. But before we dive into that, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you getting on?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. It feels nice. It feels good to talk about Bryan Gil because he's an exciting little player, but also it's actually a bit disappointing because he's leaving La Liga, and I think it's going to be something that Spurs fans can enjoy. Hopefully, I could come on in and say, oh, he's really, really good, and they'll end up having a shocker of a season. Who knows? But I'd be very surprised if that happens.
Well, look, if it's going to happen to any team, it's Tottenham's luck that a young, exciting player coming in like that will completely mess up. But before we do dive into this, to everyone watching, there's over 60 people in here already. Please do hit that like button if you are excited about the signing of Bryan Gil. Do make sure to subscribe on the channel as well if you are new. And if you want to check Ryan out on Twitter, the link is in the description down below. I highly recommend a follow over there. But look, let's dive straight into things. And Ryan, one of the first words you mentioned there was disappointing. And one of the first things I saw on Twitter when this was confirmed by Fabrizio Romano last week was your tweet, and you started it by saying this is so disappointing. What is it about Bryan Gil that just makes him such a big loss for Sevilla?
Well, I think one part of it is obviously he's a homegrown player. It's from the academy, and there is this perception with Sevilla, certainly in the last 10 years anyway, that academy players haven't really been given much of a chance. So there's quite well-known players now like Luis Alberto, Jose Campagna, sort of two of the prime examples, who were kind of allowed to go quite early on for small fees. And now, if you were to look at them, they would probably walk straight into the Sevilla team. The thing with the other part with Bryan is that he's just a really, really exciting talent. He's one of the, as soon as he was sort of like put into sort of first team football, early 2019 now, he would come on to games. He was only really used as a substitute back then, but he would come on to games and he would make a difference. He would be running at players, he'd be getting the ball. Sure, he wouldn't necessarily be beating his man every single time, but he had this innate brave mentality that I guess it's maybe kind of unusual for a player. I mean, obviously, at that point he would have been 18, and he was thrust straight into that, and he dealt with it really well. Now it was at the end of that season where Sevilla sacked their coach Pablo Machin, and he was replaced briefly by Joaquin Caparros, who, although didn't necessarily have like a massively successful coaching career with Sevilla, like say Juan de Ramos or Julian Lopetegui, Caparros is regarded as having a massive influence on essentially how sort of Sevilla's path to what they are now, from where they were in the early 2000s when he was first their coach. So he was the coach that brought through Sergio Ramos, Jesus Navas, Antonio Puerta, Dani Alves. So he came in for a few games at the end of the season, was using Bryan a bit more, and we were seeing more and more glimpses of him, and we sort of got this impression that he's going to be an important player next season. And then Lopetegui came in, and as the piece that you mentioned earlier on, I sort of said in that was, we look back now and think actually that was kind of the beginning of the end. And it is a shame because he's shown at Eibar in the past year just what a real talent he is. Because you have to remember, he's gone into that Eibar team, an Eibar team that was relegated bottom of the league, and obviously they scored fewer goals than anyone else in La Liga. But he went into that team and was a real shining light. I mean, anyone who watches lots of La Liga will be able to tell you that Bryan Gil was, probably top 3 young players in the league last season. To do that while playing for a team that gets relegated is, I mean, that is in itself quite an impressive feat, I think.
Absolutely. I think a lot of the stats about a season, not just those ones, but in terms of dribbles completed and where he ranks really high among a lot of stats in La Liga, become so much more impressive when you look at exactly where he was playing at. But I want to touch briefly on why Sevilla let him go, because I know the Sevilla fan base, as I'm sure you know, of course, that just aren't really happy with the deal that has been gotten. I know Barcelona, Real Madrid fans are perhaps a bit frustrated that they didn't move in for Bryan Gil. And you touched on it a bit in the tweet, and you also said had a little section in the article called "Talented but Incompatible." And I suppose if you could just explain exactly why it hasn't quite worked out for Bryan Gil at Sevilla and why they've let him go, I think that's something that Spurs fans really do need to hear.
Yeah, I think that is predominantly comes down to the type of player he is and the style of his play, essentially. So Lopetegui, the formation he plays is a 4-2-3-1 more or less, like the sort of the central three. One plays deep and the other two are fairly fluid. But one of the most like rigid, like non-negotiable things, it seems to be anyway, generally in his Sevilla team, is he wants his wingers to be kind of like inside forward players who come in onto their stronger foot, and then the fullbacks. So generally this last season, Jesus Navas and Marcos Acuna. So the season before that it was Reguilon and Navas. So the two fullbacks essentially provide what most people would consider to be the traditional wing play. So for example, I mean, Navas more crosses than anyone else in La Liga last season, and then Marcos Acuna again was, although he actually missed quite a few chunks of the season through injuries, again he was a frequent crosser of the ball, and so essentially with Bryan, you could argue why don't they just stick him out on the right hand side and make him come inside onto his left, and you could, but that's not how he's played. He's made his name as an orthodox, old-fashioned left winger, guy who, chalk on his boots type player. So he's hanging out wide for as long as he can, getting the ball and basically start darting straight at his marker, and that type of player doesn't seem to fit in with what Lopetegui wants from his wingers, which I personally think that with a player as talented as Bryan, I sort of wonder why he hasn't sort of felt like he could be a bit more flexible with that, like actually maybe give him a chance, potentially even try him out on the right and see how it goes. I mean, he has the skill set that you could potentially see him one day, maybe occupying more central roles, because he's quite a lot. He's good on the ball. He's a good passer. He's very good in sort of small spaces and little like one-on-one situations. But I think essentially the reason why they've let him go is because Lopetegui wants he doesn't want traditional wingers. He wants that play to come from his fullbacks, and then essentially overloading the middle with inside forwards. And unfortunately, Bryan is sort of incompatible with that, which it's going to be interesting to see how he fits in at Spurs, because I mean, obviously you'll know better than me, but it's certainly my perception of Spurs is that certainly in the last couple of years they've not necessarily played with a huge amount of width. That's a perception I have. Granted, Nuno is slightly different, and his Wolves have played with out and out wingers. So the fact that Nuno's come in and Bryan sort of fits the mould, he's not too dissimilar really in terms of style of play to Pedro Neto. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops and how he works with Nuno.
It's interesting that you mentioned Pedro Neto, because I've heard quite a few comparisons of him, and there's been some absolutely remarkable comparisons like Johan Cruyff, aside from just the looks, and Eden Hazard as well. But Pedro Neto is one that he seems to be a bit more, I suppose, in the modern game, a bit more associated with, which is odd because of how kind of old-fashioned a player he is. It's not very often nowadays that you get a left player out on that left-hand side, but I suppose it is a bit of a concern for Spurs, because as you mentioned there, the lack of width, we do also typically play with inverted wingers. Like last season, for the most part, when Jose wasn't throwing his tantrums, it was Son on the left and Gareth Bale on the right, and kind of cutting in to be effective within there. And I just have the concern that Bryan Gil may be incompatible to Tottenham's system as well, unless he does develop that ability to play on the right-hand side. But even having said that, if we do play him on the left, he is an incredible player. He's, I think, is it the fifth most or third most successful dribbles in La Liga. He's right up there on top of stats as well. And I think there's one thing that quite surprised me within that article, and it's Lopetegui's reluctance to maybe try and fit him in on that left-hand side. When last season, Youssef En-Nesyri, Sevilla striker, for any Spurs fans may not know, we were actually linked with him a bit, but he had the third most headed goals in La Liga. So do you think it is actually an incompetence within Bryan Gil's game to play on the right hand side, or maybe even a bit more centrally where he's touted to play with Spurs, or do you think it's just the magic of him as a player, that he is that old fashioned left footed, left sided player?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly for now, I would say his unique selling point in a way, his strength is playing from the left and getting crosses in, because again I think he was only one of a handful of players in La Liga who put in like more than 100 crosses last season. So that is very much how he plays. Now, I don't know how he would be, whether he would be able to adapt or not. I mean, you'd have to think that to a certain extent, there's potential for him to develop that side of his game, because at the end of the day, he is a talented footballer who plays on the wing. I think there's one. I mean, there's an element of his play on the left that might actually I think that sort of gets a little bit overlooked, to be honest. And he is quite effective at coming inside, even onto his left foot, still using his left foot. He's not. Yeah, he doesn't use his right foot a huge amount, but I think that's. I wouldn't say he's a one-dimensional player, for example. So I think the fact that he has shown like the kind of competence to come inside, even onto his left foot, then I think that kind of shows that there's certainly more to his game than him just being like one-dimensional or anything like that. But whether or not he long-term kind of fits into that mold of playing as an inside forward, I think it's very difficult to say at the moment, because he was never used there really by Sevilla from what I can recall, and if he was ever used there by Ibar, it would have been very, very rarely. I think there will have been occasions if he's taking a corner or something where he then sort of pops up on the right side, but very, very rarely. But then, it's going back to the idea with sort of how Nuno has played over the past few years and how he likes his wingers to play. Now, I guess in a way, it sort of depends on whether Bryan Gil is a signing that has been requested by Nuno, or if it's a signing that's actually been made by Paratici. And so, I think he's kind of he's a good fit, I think, for what Nuno has played at Wolves, and I think at the moment that's, in terms of kind of like gaining wisdom from any particular themes or anything like that. I think that is probably the key one to look at from Spurs' perspective. The fact that their new coach likes to play with out and out wingers, and if he continues to do that next season at Spurs, then I think that's instantly a positive for Bryan.
For sure, and I think that question is one that we're not really going to get answered until we actually see whereabouts he fits into the team, because we don't even know as fans now if we're going to be playing a 3 at the back or 4 at the back right now, and within that we can't really tell who's going to be playing in the forward positions, and then even if we do figure that out, where they're going to be playing. So that's what I'm sure we'll see answered over the coming weeks and months. But just to give a bit more context on some of these stats that you provide in that article, which everybody, this article is linked down in the description below. If you want these stats and these points put out in written form, I highly recommend everybody goes to check this out. But he had 122 open play crosses last season, which was the fifth highest in La Liga. He created 49 chances, which was and was involved in 7 goals, which was the joint most of any player under 21 in La Liga. And he also, if I can find that other stat quickly, the 5th most successful dribbles as well in there. So playing in that team, who, like you said, finished bottom of the table, rock bottom, were relegated, he really was the kind of the shining light within that team. And you can ask the question, and I've seen it, the question asked in other articles. I think BreakingTheLines.com said it. Is he quite ready for that step up to play in a top team? And I know Spurs are Conference League, we're not the absolute pinnacle. But do you think he's set for what it takes mentally and perhaps physically to make that step up to a top team in the Premier League?
Well, so I mean, in terms of mentally, and in terms of mentally and whether it being a step up or not, I think, yeah, sure. I mean, playing for Spurs is going to be a slightly different proposition to playing at Eibar. Though that's not to say that there are pressures at Eibar that are any sort of less significant than at Spurs, for example. So obviously, the fact that I'm playing in a relegation battle virtually all of last season, I think, is something that is it was not only, I would say, good experience for him, but I think that partly highlights the kind of the high standing that his coach Jose Luis Mendilibar, who's a very well respected coach in Spain, sort of shows actually the kind of the trust and respect that he had for Bryan. The fact that he's this at the start of the season he was a teenager who he was thrusting straight into the team and was putting quite a lot of responsibility on in terms of creativity. And I'd say for the most part, I think he actually delivered quite well on that. So I think in terms of his mentality and whether the move to Spurs is something that he can get his head around, I personally wouldn't have any concerns in that respect. And similarly, I mean, in terms of physicality, yes, he is quite a scrawny guy. But the thing is, he was getting sort of kicked every week in La Liga. Like a player of his style is always going to get fouled. Is always going to get a bit of it's going to get a bit of roughing up. But I think what the key element there is that he is such a tenacious player. He's very, very hard working, which is something that I've seen quite a lot of people talking about him over the past few weeks. But his work rate is something that I don't think enough people give him credit for, because he's an extremely hard worker. And that's kind of one of the key differences, really, that's between certainly both the style of play that Spurs and Wolves have last season compared to Eibar in terms of their off the ball plays. Eibar pressed so intensely, and Bryan was essential to that. He won one possession back like per 90 minutes on average, more than any other player in La Liga last season. So this is a player, he works hard, and you can tell from the amount of dribble attempts that he made last season. He's also actually quite a courageous, brave player. Sure, granted, it's not gonna come off every time, but you would only need to see a couple of games of his to kind of see right, so that's what he's about. Like, okay, he might not actually get past the first time, but he's going to keep going. I think that I've seen quite a lot of sort of player comparisons with him over the past week or so. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and for me, the one that actually sort of sticks out is Ryan Giggs, to be honest. Now, granted, that's quite high praise. I'm not saying he's going to have Giggs like impact in the Premier League or anything like that, but in terms of how he plays, I would say very comparable to a young Ryan Giggs, where he, old-fashioned winger, gets the ball, runs at his man, and his end game is to either get a cross in or get a shot away, and that's something that he was doing in La Liga, and I'd be very, very surprised if that's something that doesn't translate to the Premier League. Now, whether it works as well, who knows? He'll need patience. He'll need a bit of patience, of course, but I personally wouldn't be particularly concerned about any kind of like worries over his mentality or anything. Again, you got to remember he's a Spain international now. He's for a player of his age, he's both quite experienced, but also he has he is demonstrably brave on the ball and brave on the pitch, and I think it'd be my thinking that will translate quite well to the Premier League, and I hope it does.
That's really high praise. You touched on a few points there that I absolutely love, and it's only there when you mentioned that comparison to Ryan Giggs, as you did in the article. I think of that famous goal Ryan Giggs scored against Arsenal in the FA Cup in '99, where he's just running past players so they're not there. And every video I've seen of Bryan Gil in the last week or so, that's exactly what he's doing. He's getting the ball, and just as you think he's about to lose it, he gets that toe and he knocks it past the next player and the next player, and he just seems so difficult to knock out of possession. And I suppose a bit of a concern that some Spurs fans have had, myself especially, because I'm a massive fan of Eric Lamela. What we're losing in Eric Lamela is something you mentioned there that Bryan Gil has in the word tenacity. And you said that with the possession one, there's another stat here in the article, possession one and final third in La Liga. He came third in that list with 31 behind Kike Garcia and Mikel Oyarzabal. Is that kind of how you could epitomise him as a player? I know you can touch on his ability on the ball, but the fact that he will run and run and run and to do everything he can to win the ball back as much as he possibly can.
Yeah. I mean, granted, like it's certainly last season at Eibar. Now, the fact that he won the ball back now, that is as much. I'm good. Yeah, like he works hard, undoubtedly, but the caveat is that undoubtedly a part of that will come down to how Eibar play. Mm-hmm. Now, Eibar play, they press high and they were quite intense, whereas neither Spurs or Wolves quite had that same kind of edge when not in possession. So whether or not he actually is able to kind of he brings that over to the English game or not is slightly difficult to say, just because it depends if Nuno actually doesn't want his team to be putting pressure on right from as soon as the opposition defence have the ball, then you might not see that side of his game at all. But I think it would be a wasted element, because he's shown that that's undoubtedly quite a key strength of his game. Like it's not necessarily something that people would give much credence to or think much about in terms of when analysing or looking at an attacking player, but certainly like that side of his game fit perfectly with how Eibar play. Now, as for Lamela, I would say Lamela's got a bit more of a mischievous streak than Bryan. I wouldn't say Bryan is kind of cut from the same cloth in that respect. Like for example, the whole Martial Lamela thing last season. I would be surprised if Bryan would even get into that situation in the first place. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I don't know. That's entirely subjective, but. I think certainly if Nuno wants or is telling Bryan to just play how you play, like if you want to press like as soon as the right back gets the ball or whatever, do it. And I think if it doesn't go to the detriment to the wider team shape or whatever, then I would think it would be wise to make that suggestion, just because Bryan's shown that he can play in that system. He can play that quite aggressive pressing role, and it will be. I'd say it will be quite interesting to see if that is the side of his game that shines in the Premier League as well, because there aren't many wingers who work that hard. Like that list of players in terms of winning possession back. So I mean, in terms of per 90 over the season. Bryan's was the best of the lot, and his figures in that respect were quite unusual, really, for a winger, to be honest.
Look, that's just such good news to hear, because what we're hearing, what Nuno's doing in training, and what we're seeing in pre-season is that it looks as though we are going to play a high pressing game next season. And if this is something that he already shines at just 20 years of age, I might remind people, because some of his numbers for any player are really impressive, but for a player of his age and his lack of experience and the team he was in, they are out of this world when you really kind of put them into context. But playing in a pressing team like that, I think it's going to be something that he could potentially shine on. But then, of course, we do have to ask the question whether or not he'll be in that first team. But I still want to get your opinion as well on Eric Lamela to Sevilla, because as much as Spurs fans will get frustrated with him and his injury record and his mischievous moments, as you mentioned, his inability to use his right foot and all that, at the end of the day, he's someone that a lot of us fans have come to love, because he will do absolutely anything for the badge. He will do that to Martial. He'll go out and he'll fight Jack Wilshere in a North London derby. Whatever you need him to do, he will do. And I saw the perfect point on Twitter yesterday from a fellow YouTuber who said that Eric Lamela wore that shirt in the way that a fan would. So what is the feeling, I suppose, around Sevilla with Eric Lamela coming in?
Well, I think there are two among Sevilla fans. There are two camps at the moment. There are those who are, really quite annoyed that they've decided to actually kind of get rid of Bryan at the first opportunity, essentially. So there are those people. So those people certainly probably aren't particularly enthused about Lamela, to be honest. Whereas the other side, there is the other side of the coin where there are actually quite a few people who feeling like it's actually quite a good deal for Sevilla, in the sense that Bryan was a player who didn't fit Lopetegui's system, so would hardly have played anyway, generally speaking. Whereas Lamela is definitely the sort of player I can imagine thriving with Lopetegui, because obviously, as you say, he's got this, that kind of that mischievous streak off the ball. He's gonna work hard, as you say, whether he plays out on the right, cutting into onto the left, or actually playing in that sort of the central hole behind the striker, which actually has been a bit of a problem position for Sevilla over the past couple of years, really. So it'll be interesting to see what role he ends up taking on. But I mean, I think generally, even the people who are a bit disappointed about Bryan leaving, I think generally most fans are going to be pretty, not necessarily excited, but like intrigued by what Lamela is going to offer, because I think Sevilla in the past the past 15 years or so they've had quite a good track record of like regenerating players. Obviously, Lamela's had his injuries, and I don't know. I guess you probably know better than me, but my perception is he's not really been a regular starter over the past couple of years, really, when everyone's fit anyway. So it's going to be interesting how that works, because I still think that there are quite a few fans who think that he could do a job. I mean, the amount of players who've gone to Sevilla sort of have their reputations have maybe been not quite what they once were or something, and then gone on to enjoy like great careers. I mean, Ivan Rakitic joined Sevilla initially, having essentially really failed to kind of make good on his potential at Schalke. He went there, slow start, ended up having a transformational effect on Sevilla. Ever Banega is another one. Jose Antonio Reyes went back and ended up having a really strong sort of end to his career. Again, Jesus Navas, largely derided by quite a few people in England, and he's gone back. He's reinvigorated now as a right back and enjoy it. And he's been back in the Spain squad in the last couple of years. So I think there'll be quite a few people hopeful that there's very much he's kind of another one of those. And but I think if he continues to actually show that kind of a work rate and work ethic that he has at Spurs, and I don't doubt for a second that he will if he stays fit. Mm-hmm. I think he'll very, very quickly win people over, because obviously even the amount of Spurs fans I've seen on Twitter over the past week or so, sort of almost a bit disappointed really that he's leaving, or even if they're not necessarily disappointed, they're not necessarily disappointed, still been quite a lot of outpouring of support and emotion and actually kind of like gratitude towards him. And that's actually been quite nice. That's been quite nice to see, and hopefully he'll have a similar impact at Sevilla.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely in that boat of people that you mentioned there at the end. I am to some extent sad to see him go, but I know it's for the better because we're getting in a younger, more exciting player who can be more of a long-term fix for the club rather than just bringing someone like Lamela on for 15 minutes to get a yellow card against Chelsea or something. But the best thing that I can say to Sevilla fans is the curse that Tottenham have in terms of not winning trophies in recent years has seemed to extend as far as players that leave us going on to then win trophies. So if anything, I feel to Sevilla fans, this just means there will be potentially another Europa League in the next couple of years, but probably a trophy on the way nonetheless. Bryan Gil, good to see you in the live chat here. We have super chat as well from Mark Benjamin. Thank you very much for that, Mark. He says Lamela would do anything for the badge except release the ball. So that is a frustration that you'll certainly see with him in the coming years, depending on how long he stays there. But of course, we as Spurs fans wish the very best to Eric Lamela, and hopefully he does want to win something with Sevilla because there's a few players that have left us and have been successful. We've been kind of a bit annoyed to see, but Lamela is certainly someone that we hope to see be quite successful. But look, Ryan, it's been an absolutely incredible chat. I really do appreciate the knowledge and the insight into Bryan Gil that you've brought to us this evening. Before we do let you go, do you want to let everyone know where they can find you on Twitter and exactly what they'll be getting themselves in for if they do hit that follow button?
I'm Ryan Benson on Twitter if you want to follow. But to be honest, most of what I tweet about is Sevilla, to be honest. So, if you're keen on a bit of Spanish football, then by all means, maybe don't expect a huge amount of Spurs content after this after the Bryan Gil Lamela swap.
Well, look, if there is a place that Spurs fans want to keep up with Eric Lamela's progress, I'd say that's the best place.
Absolutely.
But look, it's been an absolutely incredible stream. Again, Ryan, thank you so much to you. I've had nearly 2,000 people joining us throughout the duration of the stream. There's still 400 left in the live chat. So thank you everyone who has tuned in. I really do appreciate the support. As always, Killian Kenny as well, good to see you in the live chat. We got Brian Ireland there as well. Another fantastic Spurs YouTuber. But we are going to wrap it up there. Do make sure to hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe to the channel if you are new, and there is a link at the top of the live chat and at the top of the description if you do want to vote for me as Best Young Content Creator of 2021, which I know is a long shot, but if you're not in it, you can't win it. I'd really appreciate the support on that one, and do make sure to vote for David Harris, the Irish Hotspur, as Best New Content Creator, and We Are Tottenham TV as Best Club Content Creator while you were there as well. It will be massively appreciated. But look, that's it from us tonight. I'm sure I'll be back over the next couple of days with some breaking news, hopefully with news of a signing in the way of Christian Romero. But for now, as always, thank you so much for watching.